Hey folks, this is the first video in a series that aspires to teach fundamentals for Google's AppScript programming language. We're going to be using an unbounded AppScript in order to explore some building blocks that I think you'll need if you look to advance further in developing with AppScript. I'm in a project folder called Fundamentals, which is where I'll be storing my project. We're going to begin by navigating to the New section of Drive, going down to More, and then opening up an AppScript project. This prompt is just saying that anybody that has access to this folder will also be able to access this project. We're going to select Create Script, and then we're going to change the title of our project to whatever you'd like to call it. I'm going to call mine Fundamentals. AppScript is Google's version of the JavaScript programming language, and you can use AppScript in order to augment Google file types such as Sheets, Docs, Slides, Gmail, etc. Additionally, you can also use it to develop web apps and applications and add-ons and extensions and all that type of stuff. We're going to begin by discussing file types or file organization. So anytime that you open up an AppScript, whether it's an unbound project like this one, which means that it was not created from a Google file type, or a bound AppScript, which means you opened up a sheet, a doc, a deck, went to the extensions menu, and then created an AppScript file. You're always going to get a code.gs file that has some boilerplate language of function, and then the name my function, and then an empty parentheses and some curly brackets. If you want to run code in AppScript, then you need to have a function. That's why whenever you open up a new file, you are presented with this boilerplate. So we're going to begin by navigating to the Files module, where we will add a new script file. We're going to change the title to A_input_output. We're going to hit enter, and you'll see that we are given another boilerplate set of function by function. I think organizing files in your project is crucial. When I first started working in AppScript, I would put all of my functions into one file and then just run my code. And that's fine, but as I got further out into the future, I found that maintaining that code base was challenging. So I've started to adopt an organization strategy of creating files for each of my functions. So this lesson is going to be structured within files so that we can contain our intentions in one place. Now you'll note that the code file comes first, followed by the A_input file. The way that files are organized in this panel are by numbers first, capital letters second, and lowercase letters third. So for example, we do not presently have the ability to sort our files, but if we change the name from lowercase a to uppercase A, then we have the ability to sort our file. Additionally, if we change the name of our code file to be 0_code, we then have the ability to put that ahead of capital A. I like to leverage this when I am developing an AppScript because I can have my quote-unquote production level code appear first by either giving it capital letters or numbers. I'm going to revert my files back to being called capital C code and lowercase a_input. So if you've worked in another integrated development environment, also known as an IDE, you might be used to having a blank file where you're able to declare a variable and start compiling your code. You will not have that ability in AppScript. You'll see that once I saved my file with these variables here, I no longer have the ability to run. And that's because AppScript requires functions in order to run. That's why when you open up a new file, you get that boilerplate that begins with a function so that you have an environment in order to execute your code. That's what we're going to be focusing on in this first lesson, is how to input and output values. Because that was something that I struggled with when I first started working in AppScript, because I came from Google Sheets and I was used to opening up a cell, inputting some data, having some output immediately come at me, which is not the case in AppScript. So we're going to begin by, if you should already have this, but if you don't, we begin by writing out a function and then we give it a name. So I'm going to call this input output. I'm going to have an open parentheses. These open parentheses are so that if your function has an input, you can declare its variable here. We are not going to be working with inputs in this lesson, so we can just leave it blank. So we'll hit the right arrow on our keyboard and we'll hit space. We're going to open up a set of curly brackets, which is required in order for us to compose our function. So we're going to hit enter twice, and we're going to begin on the third line. I'm going to be intentional about my direction in terms of when I'm hitting my keys, the keys on my keyboard. And I would encourage you to try to follow along so that when I reference a line number, you're able to see where I'm at, and we'll be at the same place. We're going to add 2 slashes. This is how you add comments in AppScript. Comments are crucial. I'm going to be leaving long comments as a way for you to be able to follow along visually after I say something. You don't have to write down everything that I say, but I would encourage you to at least enter comments so that you get in the habit of doing it. Comments are crucial when you are developing code, especially when you want to revisit code that you wrote in the past. It will be exceptionally helpful in maintaining your code and identifying bugs if they ever arise. So the first thing that we are going to do is hit the space key on our keyboard and say how to see stuff. I'm going to hit enter and then tab. So there are 2 primary ways to see things. The first is capital L logger.log open parentheses. So you can use logger.log to see anything. It will pop up in your execution log. And this is the way that I create transparency in my projects. So I'm going to enter in a single quote, which means that I am going to be using text, which is also known as a string. So I'm going to say hello. I'm going to hit the right arrow on my keyboard twice, and I'm going to add a semicolon. I'm going to save my project. And now you can see that our input-output function appears up top in this menu here, and we have the ability to run our code, which is what we will do. And now you'll see that my execution log says hello. Another way to see things is by using console.log, and we'll use open parentheses. And this time we're going to pass a number, which is also known as an integer. So I'm going to enter in my favorite number 5. I'm going to hit the right arrow on my keyboard. I'm going to add a semicolon, and I'm going to hit run. Cool. So 5 appears, hello appears, everything is looking great. The nice thing about AppScript and programming languages is if you don't want something to appear anymore, you don't have to delete it. You can add a comment in front of it, or you can quote unquote comment it out. So you have 2 options to do that. First, you can click in front of the thing that you want to comment out, and you can hit 2 slashes. And then when you run your code, you'll see that it no longer appears. Additionally, if you want to uncomment something, you can either delete both of the slashes, like I just did, and now you can see it appears again, or you can use keyboard shortcuts, which I would encourage. My primary goal is to cut down on clicks, which means the number of times that I have to move my hand over to my mouse to click on something. So I like to use keyboard shortcuts whenever I can. I am on a Mac, so all of my keyboard shortcuts are going to be for a Mac. If you're on Windows, I think the difference is when I say command, you probably use control, but I apologize because I haven't used a Windows machine in quite some time, so I don't know the keyboard shortcuts as well as I do with the Mac. So if you want to comment something out with your keyboard, you can use Shift, Command, hit the right arrow, and then hit Command and slash at the same time. And then that will comment out your code. Cool. And one other note is you can also add comments at the end of lines. So you can say little note to self. And when you highlight this and uncomment it, you'll see that that little note still remains. So you can add comments after things or before things. These are the two ways that I will use comments. Line 3 and line 5 are examples of that. Cool. So we are going to continue forward by hitting enter twice, hit the left arrow on our keyboard twice, and we're going to add 2 slashes for a comment, hit space, and now we're going to learn how to create variables. And hit enter and tab. I want to make a couple of stylistic notes here. The reason that I'm telling you to hit tab after you add a comment is because it opens up the ability for you to have a little shelf so that you can collapse things. So you'll notice that my lines or the indentations on line 3 and 7 align so that I have this ability now where once we're done with this section, we have the ability to create this little shelf here where we have a comment that says how to see stuff so that we know that that's what is in this little window in there or in that little shelf. So when I say hit enter and tab, that's why I'm recommending it so that as your function gets longer, you can kind of make it the view a little bit easier so that you can focus on just the thing that you want to do at that given time. Additionally, this is one way where you could like map out what you're going to do before you do it by adding comments so that you kind of have a checklist where then you like work on your code underneath and you can close it or you can open it or whatever. Also, I didn't touch on why semicolons are there. Honestly, I don't know. I should have looked it up. I'm sorry that I didn't, but it's just something that when I learned AppScript was in all the tutorials that I watched and in all the documentation that I read. I just presume that it is a legacy of JavaScript that was adopted within AppScript. So you don't have to add them, but it is very common to see the semicolons after you finish a line. And I guess it's kind of just an indication that it's almost like a period at the end of a sentence. If somebody more knowledgeable than I has watched this video, please, educate all of us in the comments section if you find out or know why semicolons are at the end. Anyway, we're going to resume on line 8, and we're going to talk about variables. So there are 4 different ways that you can add variables in AppScript. The first is you can just declare a variable. So in this case, I'm going to use the letter X, and I'm going to set it equal to first example. I'm going to hit the right arrow, and I'm going to add a semicolon. So you don't have to, you can just like declare a variable, and that's by saying some type of character or name or whatever, and then you use the equal sign, and then you can use single quotes if you want to use a string, you can use double quotes if you want to use a string, or you can just enter in a number if you want to enter in a number. So I'm going to hit enter, and I am going to hit enter again and add 2 slashes for a comment where I will log it for transparency. So I'm going to hit enter and tab, and I'm going to use logger.log in order to log out X. Now, I want you to note that X is not showing up in our autocomplete down there, right? So when I hit X in here, you can see that we're getting something called XML service, but we are not getting the option of just the letter X. I'm going to go to the right, and I'm going to add a semicolon, and I am going to hit run. So you'll see that we are getting our first example here by logging out X. We're going to go back to line 8. We're going to hit enter, and now we're going to declare a variable of Y, and we're going to set that, actually, you know what? Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. we're going to use var. So you can see that var shows up as blue in the same way that function shows up as blue. AppScript is going to give you feedback about what you do. So var is giving you an indication that this is a special use of characters. Var is short for variable. So we are going to declare var y, and we are going to set that equal to single quotes second example. I'm going to hit the right arrow, add semicolon, and now when we hit in y, you can see that it shows up as a suggested value in our autocomplete menu. So that is the one difference, that if you do not use var or another prefix in order to indicate that this is a variable, then it will not show up as a suggestion in your search box. But as we saw, it doesn't matter. You can still just declare a variable if you want to. This is, I write Python code. I write Python quite a bit. And in Python, you don't need to declare something as a variable or anything else. You can just use a name and save something as a variable. So if you're coming from Python and you like coding in the way that you code in Python, you totally can. But again, when you look at other people's code, they are probably going to have some version of variable declaration like this with a prefix. So you might want to use that in order to align with their practices. Another example is let. So we'll set that equal to third example. So let is another way of declaring a variable. The only thing with let is I don't think you have the ability to redeclare let. So if we try to run this code, you can see that we're getting an error because Z has already been declared. So basically when you use let, it makes it so that there's only one instance of let. Whereas if you redeclare y, like the variable y, you'll see that, oh, my apologies. So we're going to log out y instead of Z now. So originally y was second example, and then we did another variable y where we redeclared it. Additionally, with x, we could also do the same thing where we are going to change x to be equal to redeclare, and we're going to log out x. And now you can see, instead of saying first example, x is now redeclare. So when you're using a variable, you have the ability to change what it is equal to. So if we do up top here, logger.log x, you'll see that we get first example, and then when we log it out down on line 14, we are getting redeclare. And that's because you have the ability to redeclare variables, but you do not have the ability to redeclare something when you use let. Additionally, there is const, which stands for constant, where you can only have one. So it's the same thing as let, where you can use const, but that's the only time that you can use const. So if we declare a variable of a after const, you'll see that the same issue arises, where we've already declared a as a constant of only one, and thus we cannot use a again. Cool. So the last thing that I want to touch on is single quotes versus double quotes. So we're going to hit enter and tab. So it doesn't matter what you use. You can use single quotes, you can use double quotes. It's really whatever your preference is. The one recommendation that I would strongly make is that you just want to remain consistent with whatever you use. So if you start using single quotes, keep using single quotes. If you start using double quotes, keep using double quotes. You don't want to mix and match. Just stick to one. There are two instances, though, where you are, at least I have found that you need to have specific use cases. So for example, if you want to use something like you are, your, right, like something like this, you're going to want to use double quotes. So we're going to declare a var of double, and we're going to set that equal to double quote, you are is the same thing as your. So you'll see we have an apostrophe in here. If we are using single quotes, what'll happen is this first single quote here will presume that this single quote here is the closing single quote of the string. And thus you're then going to have stuff outside of it. And then this one is going to think that this is another string out here. So the way to get around that is by using double quotes like this. Now, there might be some type of function you could use in order to clean this up, but I just wanted to note this because I have run into this before, where the apostrophe trips up these single quotes. So additionally, you have a situation where you might have single quotes that you want to use, which is if you want to quote, double quote someone, right? So if you want to have like a quote in there, like a quotation where someone says something, you'll want to have it wrapped in single quotes. So this is the only case where it's like if you're using single quotes and you have some type of like output that you want to have where you want to say the word you are as a conjugated your or I am as a conjugated I am, you'll probably want to switch over to double quotes because your string won't work. Additionally, if you have some type of like we are quoting words that someone else said and you've been using double quotes, then you're probably going to want to use single quotes like this.
I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like to continue following this series, there's a playlist linked in the description.